My father-in-law left me his house instead of his own son, so my husband tried to forge the will. When Frank died, I expected his son David, my husband of 8 years, to inherit everything. Frank had always been cold to me, barely acknowledging my existence at family dinners. He'd grunt responses to my questions and never once thanked me for the casseroles I brought over. So imagine my shock when the lawyer called on a Tuesday morning while I was folding laundry. Mrs. Morrison, your father-in-law has left you the family estate on Maple Drive, including all contents and financial assets. I dropped the phone. The estate was worth over $2 million. A sprawling Victorian house with 12 rooms, antique furniture, and Frank's classic car collection. David was in the kitchen when I told him, stirring sugar into his coffee like he did every morning for 8 years. His routine was sacred. 2 cups, 3 sugar cubes, never cream. That's impossible, he said, his face going white. The coffee mug slipped from his hands and shattered against the tile floor. Dad would never leave you anything. He barely tolerated you. The reading is tomorrow at 2 p.m., I said, still processing the shock myself. That night, David paced our bedroom like a caged animal. There has to be an explanation. Maybe he was confused from the medications. Maybe someone influenced him. David, your father was sharp until the end. As sharp enough to screw over his only son? The next day, we sat in Mr. Henderson's mahogany-paneled office. David's hands were shaking as the lawyer read the will aloud with deliberate precision. To my daughter-in-law, Sarah Morrison, who showed me more genuine kindness in 8 years than my own son showed in 35. I leave my house at 1247 Maple Drive and all its contents, including my investment portfolio valued at $1.2 million. David shot up from his chair like he'd been electrocuted. This is wrong. My father was sick, confused. Sarah manipulated him during those visits. Mr. Henderson adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses calmly. Your father came to me 6 months ago, Mr. Morrison. He was of completely sound mind and very clear about his intentions. But why? David demanded, turning to me with wild eyes. What did you do to him? I thought about all those Tuesday afternoons I'd spent with Frank after his stroke, helping him shower when David claimed he was too busy with work, reading mystery novels to him when David said hospitals made him uncomfortable, sitting through his chemo treatments when David couldn't handle seeing his father weak. I just visited him, I said quietly. David's face twisted with pure rage. We're contesting this. There's no way in hell. Actually, Mr. Henderson interrupted, there's something else your father left. He pulled out a sealed envelope. A letter. He suspected you might challenge the will? David went completely pale. What kind of letter? The lawyer's expression darkened as he scanned the contents. One that explains exactly why he chose your wife over his own son, in very specific detail. David grabbed my arm so hard I winced, his fingers digging into my flesh. We're leaving, right now. In the car, David was silent until we reached a red light on Main Street. Then he turned to me with eyes I'd never seen before, cold and calculating. You're going to sign that house over to me tomorrow. David, I don't think, or I'll make sure you never see a penny of any of it. I'll drag you through court for years. That night, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to find David hunched over his laptop in the dark. On the screen was a PDF of Frank's will, with David's name carefully typed where mine had been. I stood frozen in the doorway of our home office, watching my husband of 8 years forge his father's will. The blue glow of the laptop illuminated David's face as he meticulously changed every instance of Sarah Elizabeth Morrison to David James Morrison. His tongue was sticking out slightly in concentration, the same expression he wore when balancing our checkbook or assembling IKEA furniture. What are you doing? I whispered into the darkness. He spun around so fast the office chair nearly toppled over, slamming the laptop shut with a sharp crack. Nothing. Go back to bed, Sarah. But I'd seen enough. My hands were shaking as I backed toward the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. David, that's illegal. You could go to prison for forgery. He stood up slowly, unfolding his 6-foot frame, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I was genuinely afraid of him. The man who'd cried during our wedding vows, who brought me soup when I had the flu, who'd held me through 3 miscarriages. That man was gone. In his place stood someone I didn't recognize. Nobody's going to prison, he said, his voice eerily calm. You're going to keep your mouth shut, and we're going to submit this corrected version to Henderson tomorrow morning. Corrected version? I stared at him in complete disbelief. David, that's fraud. That's a felony. That's justice, he snapped, his mask slipping for just a moment. I'm his son. I'm his blood. I deserve that house, not some woman who showed up 8 years ago and played nursemaid to get into his will. The cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This was the man who'd promised to love and protect me through sickness and health, who'd held me while I sobbed about my own father's sudden heart attack 2 years ago, who'd convinced me that his family's coldness toward me didn't matter because we had each other. Your father was completely clear about what he wanted, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. David laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitter resentment that seemed to have been festering for decades. My father was a senile old man who you systematically manipulated. Those precious Tuesday visits? I know exactly what you were really doing. Whispering poison in his ear, turning him against his own son, making yourself indispensable so he'd remember you in his will. I was taking care of him because you wouldn't, I shot back. I had a job. I had real responsibilities. I couldn't just drop everything to play caregiver like some unemployed housewife. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. I had quit my teaching job 3 years ago when David convinced me we didn't need 2 incomes, that he wanted to take care of me. Now I realized it had been about control, not love. He was dying, David. He needed his family. David's face twisted with years of suppressed rage. Don't you dare lecture me about family. You have no idea what it was like growing up with that man. The constant criticism, the impossible standards. The way nothing I ever did was good enough. Perfect grades weren't enough. Making varsity wasn't enough. Getting into law school wasn't enough. He always found something wrong, something to nitpick. So you abandoned him when he needed you most? I protected myself from his toxic bullshit. Something you wouldn't understand with your perfect little family where everyone actually loved each other. The irony wasn't lost on me. David had always resented my close relationship with my parents, making snide comments about how some people had it easy. Yet he couldn't understand why his father chose someone who actually showed him kindness. I turned to leave, planning to grab my phone and call Mr. Henderson immediately, but David's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with bruising force. Where do you think you're going? To call the lawyer and tell him what you're doing. His grip tightened until I gasped in pain, his fingers like a vice around my bones. You're not calling anyone. We're going to fix this together tomorrow. You're going to smile and apologize for the confusion, explain that you were emotional and misunderstood Frank's intentions, and we're going to submit the real will. Let go of me, David. Promise me first, Sarah. Promise me you won't say anything. I'm not promising anything. This is insane. He twisted my wrist until tears sprang to my eyes, the pain shooting up my arm. Promise me, or I'll make your life a living hell. I'll contest the will anyway and drag you through court for years. I'll tell everyone you seduced my dying father for his money. I'll hire investigators to dig up every embarrassing thing about your past. I'll make sure you never see a penny of that inheritance. Nobody would believe that, I said, but doubt was creeping in. Really? A young wife who conveniently shows up every Tuesday when the vulnerable old man is alone and confused? Who suddenly inherits everything while his devoted son gets nothing? What do you think that would look like to a jury? Especially when I tell them about all those times you encouraged him to change his medications, all those private conversations behind closed doors. I stared at him, realizing with crystal clarity that I was married to a complete stranger. 8 years, and I'd never truly known this man. This isn't you, David. This isn't who you are. This is exactly who I am, he said coldly. You just never bothered to pay attention. You were too busy playing the perfect wife, weren't you? He finally released my wrist, leaving angry red marks that were already starting to bruise. We'll leave for Henderson's office at 1:30 tomorrow. Wear something nice. That blue dress I bought you for your birthday. Look respectable. And Sarah? His smile was ice cold. If you even think about betraying me, remember that I know where you sleep every single night. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. Cross me on this, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I locked myself in our guest bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, my mind racing in circles. 8 years of marriage, and I'd never seen this side of him. The calculated manipulation, the casual threats, the willingness to use physical force. How had I missed all the signs? But as I replayed our entire relationship with new eyes, the red flags had been there from the beginning. The way he'd gradually isolated me from my college friends, claiming they were jealous of our happiness and didn't really understand our relationship. How he'd convinced me to quit my teaching job, saying he made enough money and wanted to take care of me, but really removing my financial independence. The subtle criticisms disguised as loving concern. The way he'd make me feel guilty for wanting to visit my own parents, claiming I was choosing them over him. I'd mistaken control for protection, possessiveness for love. At 3:17 a.m., I crept out of the bathroom as quietly as possible. David was snoring loudly in our bedroom, the laptop closed on his nightstand like evidence waiting to be destroyed. I tiptoed to the kitchen and called the one person I trusted completely. Sarah? Jesus, it's 3 in the morning, my sister Emma answered, her voice thick with sleep. What's wrong? I need help, I whispered, then explained everything. Frank's will, the inheritance, David's forgery, his threats. Pack a bag right now and get out of there, Emma said immediately, all traces of sleepiness gone. Come to my place. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. I can't leave. If I disappear tonight, he'll know I'm planning to expose him. He'll have time to cover his tracks, maybe even destroy the evidence. Then what's your plan? I looked toward our bedroom where my husband was sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about his $2 million inheritance. I'm going to beat him at his own game. The next morning, David was unusually cheerful at breakfast, humming while he made his coffee with that same precise ritual. 2 cups, 3 sugar cubes, never cream. He even made me scrambled eggs, something he hadn't done in months. Ready for our appointment with Henderson? He asked, kissing my forehead like the previous night had never happened. I forced what I hoped was a convincing smile. Actually, about that. I've been thinking all night, and I think you're right. Frank was sick those last few months. The medications were affecting his judgment. He didn't really know what he was doing. David's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. Really? You mean that? I don't deserve that house or his money. You're his son, his flesh and blood. It should go to family. I'll tell Mr. Henderson there was a misunderstanding, that I was too emotional to think clearly yesterday. That's my girl, he said, pulling me into a tight hug. I knew you'd see reason once you calmed down. You've always been so logical, so fair. It's one of the things I love most about you. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed he meant it. At 1:30 sharp, we walked into Henderson's office together. I was wearing the blue dress David had requested, and he kept his hand possessively on my lower back. Mr. Henderson looked genuinely surprised to see us back so soon. How can I help you folks today? There's been a terrible mistake, I said, letting my voice shake. Not with fear this time, but with anticipation of what was coming. About Frank's will. What kind of mistake, Mrs. Morrison? David leaned forward eagerly, practically bouncing in his chair. My wife thinks she may have misunderstood my father's intentions yesterday. She was emotional, overwhelmed by grief. The house should obviously go to his son, his actual family. Mr. Henderson frowned, his weathered face creasing with confusion. Mrs. Morrison, your father-in-law was extremely specific about his wishes. He came to me multiple times over 6 months to make sure everything was legally ironclad. There's absolutely no misunderstanding. But surely, David interrupted, if Sarah doesn't want the house and is willing to sign it over? Actually, I said, pulling out my phone with steady hands, before we discuss anything else, I think you should see something important. I'd spent the morning figuring out how to extract and edit the footage from our home security cameras, the same cameras David had insisted we install throughout the house for protection after a rash of break-ins in our neighborhood. The irony was delicious. I played the crystal-clear video of David at his laptop at 2:17 a.m., methodically changing every instance of my name to his on the will document. The blood drained from David's face so quickly I thought he might faint. That's not what it looks like, he stammered, his confident demeanor crumbling. Really? Mr. Henderson leaned forward, studying the phone screen with sharp interest. Because it looks exactly like you're systematically altering a legal document, which, as you know, is a felony. I was confused, emotional about losing my father. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never intended to actually submit anything, clearly enough to change every single instance of your wife's name to yours, the lawyer observed dryly. That suggests quite a bit of deliberate thought and planning. David turned to me with desperate eyes, his mask finally slipping completely. You recorded me? Your own husband? How could you betray me like this? How could I betray you? I stared at him in amazement. You threatened me, physically hurt me, and tried to steal your father's final wishes. My husband wouldn't do any of those things. Sarah, please. I was upset, not thinking straight. I didn't mean any of it. You know I'd never really hurt you. I pulled up my sleeve, showing the dark purple bruises on my wrist from where he'd grabbed me. You already did hurt me, Mr. Henderson was already reaching for his phone. Mr. Morrison, I hope you understand that forging a will is a serious felony. I'm legally required to report this to the authorities. Wait, David's voice cracked with panic. You can't do this. Sarah, tell him it was just a misunderstanding. Tell him I was grieving and made a stupid mistake. Like your father's will was a stupid mistake? I asked calmly. Please, David begged, actually getting on his knees beside my chair. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling, anger management, whatever you want. I'll never touch you again. Just don't let them arrest me. You should have thought about that before you decided to commit fraud. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to live? You're taking everything from me. I'm not taking anything. Your father gave me what he wanted me to have. You're the one who tried to steal it. As the police arrived to take David's statement and collect the evidence, I thought about Frank's letter, the one Mr. Henderson had mentioned but never fully read aloud. I asked to see it while David was being questioned in the next room. My dear Sarah, it began in Frank's distinctive shaky handwriting. If you're reading this, it means David has shown his true colors and contested my will. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've been watching my son all his life, hoping he'd change, praying he'd develop some sense of empathy or gratitude. But some people never learn to see beyond their own wants and needs. You showed me more genuine kindness in the last 2 years of my life than David showed me in 35 years. When I had my stroke, he visited exactly 3 times in 6 months. When I started chemotherapy, he couldn't be bothered to drive me to a single appointment. When I was lying in that hospital bed, scared and alone, wondering if I was going to die, you were the one who sat with me. You read me those ridiculous mystery novels I loved. You brought me real food when the hospital slop was inedible. You held my hand when the pain was unbearable. David couldn't even look at me those last months. I disgusted him, reminded him of his own mortality. But you saw me as a human being worth caring for, not because you wanted something from me, but because it was the right thing to do. I know David will claim you manipulated me, that you turned me against him. The truth is, he turned me against himself years ago with his selfishness and indifference. You are the daughter I never had, and I trust you to use my home to build the family you deserve, whether that's with David if he can change, or with someone who truly appreciates your worth. Don't let my son's bitterness poison the gift I'm giving you. You've earned every penny through your kindness and compassion. Be happy, Sarah, and know that someone finally sees your true value. With love and gratitude, Frank Morrison. P.S. If David is reading this over your shoulder, know that I'm not senile, I'm not confused, and I'm not being manipulated. I'm finally doing what I should have done years ago, rewarding genuine love over biological obligation. Tears blurred my vision as I read it twice, then carefully folded the letter and put it in my purse. But that wasn't the end of Frank's surprises. 2 days later, Mr. Henderson called me back to his office. There's one more thing your father-in-law left you, he said, pulling out a small wooden box. He insisted I wait until after any complications were resolved. Inside the box was a key and another letter. Sarah, this key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find some additional items I wanted you to have. My mother's jewelry, some old photographs, and one more surprise. The bank manager, Mrs. Chen, is expecting you. Also, I've arranged for the property taxes on the house to be paid from a separate account for the next 10 years. I know David might try to make things financially difficult for you, so I wanted to ensure you could keep the house regardless of what happens. You'll never have to worry about losing your home. Frank. At the bank, Mrs. Chen led me to the safety deposit box with solemn ceremony. Inside, along with beautiful vintage jewelry and family photos dating back to the 1940s, was a deed to a small cabin in the mountains. Frank's secret retreat that even David didn't know about. Mr. Morrison purchased this property 15 years ago, Mrs. Chen explained. He used to go there to fish and think. He said it was the only place he ever felt truly peaceful. There was also a bank statement showing an account with $200,000. Money Frank had been quietly saving from his pension and Social Security for years. For emergencies, his note read. Or for whatever makes you happy. You've given me more happiness in 2 years than I had in the previous 30. Use this to live the life you deserve. I drove up to the cabin that weekend. It was a small, rustic place with a stone fireplace and windows overlooking a pristine lake. Frank had left it fully furnished, with bookshelves full of mystery novels and a tackle box ready for fishing. On the kitchen table was one final note. Welcome to your sanctuary. I hope you find as much peace here as I did. The neighbors, Bill and Margaret Thompson, have been keeping an eye on the place. They're good people who knew about my gift to you and are excited to meet you. There's a garden plot out back where Margaret says the tomatoes grow especially well. I think you'll like it here. Love, Frank. 3 weeks later, I served David with divorce papers. He'd been staying at his cousin's cramped apartment across town, calling me 15 times a day with increasingly desperate apologies and promises to change. But I'd finally learned the difference between manipulation and genuine remorse. The divorce was surprisingly straightforward. Since Frank's inheritance was clearly intended for me alone, and we'd kept separate bank accounts, David couldn't claim much beyond his personal belongings and half the value of our modest house, which we'd have to sell anyway since I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. David's lawyer tried to argue that Frank's gifts were marital property, but Mr. Henderson had anticipated this too. Every document explicitly stated that the inheritance was for Sarah Morrison individually, not as part of any marital estate. During the proceedings, I learned more about David's relationship with his father. Frank had tried repeatedly over the years to bridge the gap between them. He'd offered to pay for family therapy, invited David on fishing trips, even offered to help start David's own law practice. David had rejected every overture, claiming his father was trying to control him. The truth is, David's own cousin testified, David was always jealous of anyone who got Frank's attention. Even as kids, if Frank praised another family member or spent time with someone else, David would sulk for days. The final blow came when David's therapist, the one he'd been court-ordered to see, submitted a report stating that David had significant narcissistic tendencies and difficulty accepting responsibility for his actions. The therapist recommended continued counseling and anger management classes. 6 months later, as I sat in Frank's beautiful garden, my garden now, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine peace. I'd planted the vegetable garden Frank had always wanted, but never had the strength to maintain. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, herbs. The whole backyard smelled like fresh earth and growing things. Emma visited every weekend, bringing her 2 kids to play in the spacious yard. Frank would have loved seeing this, she said one Saturday, watching her 5-year-old chase butterflies among the flower beds. He did love it, I replied. Deadheading roses. That's exactly why he made sure it would continue to be cared for. I'd also started volunteering at the local hospice, reading to patients and helping families navigate the difficult final months. Frank's letter had given me a new perspective on what really mattered. Not money or inheritance, but the simple act of showing up for people when they need it most. The work was emotionally demanding, but deeply rewarding. I met families going through the same struggles I'd witnessed with Frank, and I could offer them practical advice as well as emotional support. How to talk to doctors, how to make difficult decisions, how to find moments of joy even in the darkest times. One patient, an elderly woman named Dorothy, reminded me so much of Frank that I started bringing her the same mystery novels I'd read to him. Her grandson, Marcus, was going through a bitter divorce and barely visited. Dorothy would light up when I arrived each Tuesday, the same day I'd visited Frank. You remind me of my daughter, she told me one afternoon. She died 10 years ago. Cancer. She would have loved you. When Dorothy passed 6 months later, she left me a small inheritance, her collection of first edition mystery novels, and a letter thanking me for making her final months bearable when her own family couldn't be bothered. Marcus contested her will, claiming I'd manipulated his grandmother just like David had accused me of manipulating Frank. But the hospice staff testified about my regular visits and genuine care for Dorothy. The judge ruled in my favor, noting that kindness is not manipulation, and those who confuse the two often reveal more about themselves than the person they're accusing. A year after Frank's death, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer. David had been sentenced to 200 hours of community service and 2 years of probation for the will forgery, but avoided jail time due to his previously clean record and what the judge called genuine remorse. He'd moved to Denver and started working for a nonprofit law clinic helping low-income families navigate legal issues. Sarah, the letter began in David's familiar handwriting, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just want you to know that therapy has helped me understand what both you and my father saw that I was blind to for so long. I spent my whole life feeling entitled to things I never earned. Love, respect, inheritance. While you earned all of those things through simple human decency and consistent kindness, I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I never saw what I was actually receiving. Working with families here who have so little but give so much to each other has been humbling. I met a woman last week who reminded me of you. She's caring for her husband who has Alzheimer's, working 2 jobs and raising their grandchildren, but she still volunteers to read to kids at the library every Saturday. When I asked why she does so much for others when her own life is so difficult, she said, because kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything. That's when I finally understood what my father meant when he called you the daughter he never had. You have something I never learned but I'm trying to develop, the ability to love people without expecting anything in return. You cared for him because he needed caring for, not because you wanted something from him. I hope someday I can become the person you thought you married, even if it's too late for us. You deserved so much better than the man I was, and I'm trying to become someone who could be worthy of the love you showed my father. I hope you're happy in the house. Dad would be proud of what you're doing with it. I drive by sometimes when I'm in town visiting my cousin, and seeing the garden in bloom and the lights on in the evening makes me smile. It looks like a home should look, warm and alive and loved. With sincere regret and hope for your happiness, David P.S. I'm in therapy twice a week now and working with a sponsor through a program for people with control issues. I'm learning to take responsibility for my actions instead of blaming others for my problems. It's hard work, but necessary work. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Some bridges once burned don't need rebuilding. But I was glad to know David was getting help and trying to change, even if it was too late for our marriage. Instead of dwelling on the past, I spent that afternoon planting a memorial rose bush in Frank's honor, next to the wooden bench where we used to sit together during those Tuesday visits. The roses were the old-fashioned kind that smell like heaven, Frank's favorite variety that his mother had grown in this same garden decades earlier. Sometimes I still sit on that bench in the evenings watching the sunset and telling Frank about the renovations I'm planning, or the book I'm reading, or the new patients I'm meeting at the hospice. I like to think he can hear me, and I know he's proud that his final act of love couldn't be forged, stolen, or corrupted by his son's greed, only honored by someone who understood that inheritance isn't about blood relations, but about the family we choose to create through our actions. The house feels alive now in a way it never did when Frank was declining and David was absent. I've opened up rooms that had been closed for years, filled them with light and laughter when Emma's family visits, turned Frank's sterile study into a cozy reading nook where I can curl up with those mystery novels, the same ones I used to read to him. I also discovered Frank's workshop in the basement, filled with woodworking tools and half-finished projects. He'd been building a rocking chair, probably for the grandchildren he'd never had. I'm taking woodworking classes now to finish it, along with the birdhouses and garden benches he'd started. Working with my hands in his space feels like a conversation across time. Every Tuesday, I still think of Frank, not with sadness, but with gratitude for the unexpected gift he gave me. Not just financial security, but the knowledge that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems unnoticed. He saw everything, remembered everything, and in the end, he made sure that love won over entitlement. Last month, I got a call from Marcus, Dorothy's grandson, who had contested her will. He was calling to apologize. I found some letters my grandmother wrote but never sent, he said. All about you, about how much your visits meant to her, about how you reminded her of her daughter. I was angry and looking for someone to blame for my own guilt about not visiting more. I'm sorry I put you through that legal mess. It's okay, I told him. Grief makes people do things they normally wouldn't. She really loved you, he said. And reading her letters, I can see why. You gave her something I couldn't. Your time and attention without wanting anything in return. These days, I split my time between the main house and Frank's mountain cabin. The neighbors, Bill and Margaret Thompson, have become like surrogate grandparents. Margaret taught me to can vegetables from the garden, and Bill showed me the best fishing spots on the lake. They tell me stories about Frank's visits over the years, how peaceful he seemed here, how he talked about wanting to share this place with someone who would appreciate it. He said he was waiting for the right person, Margaret told me one evening as we sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset. Said he'd know them when he found them. Guess he found you. I've also started writing, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the confidence to try. There's something about the quiet of the mountains and the rhythm of the seasons that makes the words flow. I'm working on a book about caregiving, about finding grace in difficult situations, about how the people we care for often give us more than we give them. Frank's story is in there, and Dorothy's, and all the other patients I've met at the hospice who taught me that love isn't something you hoard or demand, but something you give freely and trust to find its way back to you in unexpected forms. The book proposal got picked up by a small press that specializes in memoirs about family and healing. My editor says the title, Tuesday Afternoons, Lessons in Love and Loss, perfectly captures the heart of the story. On the 2-year anniversary of Frank's death, I organized a memorial service at the house. Emma and her family came, along with Mr. Henderson, several of Frank's former neighbors, and some of the staff from the hospice where I volunteer. We planted a memorial garden with all of Frank's favorite flowers and shared stories about kindness and second chances. David didn't come, but he sent a wreath with a card that said simply, "Thank you for loving my father the way he deserved. I hope someday I can learn to love that way too." It was the first acknowledgement he'd ever made that love is a choice and a practice, not something you deserve by accident of birth. As the sun set on that anniversary evening, I sat on Frank's bench surrounded by the people who had become my chosen family. Emma's children playing in the garden, Margaret and Bill sharing stories, Mr. Henderson quietly reading one of Frank's mystery novels. This is what Frank had envisioned when he left me his home. Not just a building, but a gathering place for love and laughter, and the kind of ordinary moments that make life extraordinary. The house is mine now, legally and completely, but more importantly, it's become what Frank always hoped it could be, a place where kindness lives and grows, where people are valued for who they are rather than what they can provide, where every Tuesday afternoon is a reminder that love freely given always finds its way home. That's a legacy worth inheriting, worth protecting, and worth passing on to the next generation, who will understand that the most valuable things in life can't be forged, stolen, or demanded, only earned through the simple, revolutionary act of showing up for each other when it matters most. My fiancé's parents said, "We'll pay for the wedding if we control everything." So I paid for it myself, and they watched from the cheap seats. Let me back up. I met Owen at a coffee shop where I was studying for the bar exam. He spilled his latte on my constitutional law notes, apologized profusely, bought me another coffee, and asked if he could make it up to me with dinner. 3 years later, he proposed on the same corner where that coffee shop used to be before it closed down. I should have seen the red flags during that first family dinner. Owen's mother, Diane, greeted me at the door with air kisses that didn't touch my cheeks. His father, Richard, barely looked up from his phone. The house was one of those modern monstrosities with more square footage than warmth, all white marble and cold steel. "So you're the lawyer," Diane said, making it sound like an accusation. "Almost," I said. "I take the bar in 6 weeks." "How practical," she said in a tone that meant the opposite. Owen's last girlfriend was a Vanderbilt. Her family summered in the Hamptons. Owen squeezed my hand under the table. I squeezed back, thinking this was just awkward small talk. I had no idea it was a declaration of war. The dinner was excruciating. Diane spent 2 hours listing everything Owen's ex-girlfriend had accomplished by age 25. Richard interrupted occasionally to mention his connections at various law firms, the implication being that I'd need his help to get anywhere. When I mentioned I already had a job offer at a firm I'd worked for during law school, Diane's smile tightened. "Oh, you'll want to reconsider that once you and Owen start a family," she said. "No point in building a career you'll just abandon." I started to respond, but Owen jumped in. "Mom, we've talked about this. Let's not do this tonight." That should have been my first clue. Not that his mother was controlling, but that he'd had this conversation with her before, and nothing had changed. We left early, claiming I had to study. In the car, Owen apologized. "They're just protective," he said. "Once they get to know you, they'll love you." I wanted to believe him. I really did. The engagement was perfect. Small, intimate, just us and the sunset. I called my parents immediately. My mom cried happy tears. My dad demanded to meet Owen properly, which meant a barbecue in their backyard with my 3 brothers and their families. It was chaos and laughter and my nephew spilling juice on Owen's pants, and everyone teasing him about joining the family. Owen fit right in. Then we called his parents. "That's wonderful, darling," Diane said in that flat tone people use when they're absolutely not thrilled. "When are you coming over? We need to discuss the wedding." The wedding discussion happened 3 days later. Owen and I had already talked about what we wanted. Something small, maybe 75 people, at this beautiful garden venue I'd found. Intimate, personal, affordable, since we were saving for a house. We hadn't even sat down before Diane pulled out a 3-ring binder. I'm not kidding. A 3-ring binder with tabs and printed spreadsheets. "I've been planning this wedding since Owen was born," she announced. "I have very specific ideas." "Mom," Owen started, but she held up a manicured hand. "Let me finish. Your father and I want to give you the wedding of your dreams. The Ashford estate, 300 guests, full orchestra, 8-course dinner. We'll cover everything." She slid a folder across the table. "I've already contacted vendors." I opened the folder. The venue was a castle, an actual imported stone castle that some billionaire had rebuilt in Connecticut. The estimated cost was $450,000. "This is incredibly generous," I said carefully, "but it's not really our style. We were thinking something smaller, more intimate. Nonsense. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Everyone who matters will be there." "Everyone who matters to whom?" I asked. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "To us," Diane said, each word precise. "To our family, our friends, our business associates. Owen is our only son. This wedding will be done properly." Richard finally looked up from his phone. "We're offering to pay for everything. That should make this easy." "It does," I agreed, "and we appreciate it. But this is our wedding. We should have a say in what it looks like." Diane's smile could have cut glass. "Of course, dear. You'll have plenty of input on the things that matter to you. The dress, your bridesmaids, those little details. But the overall vision, the important decisions, those will need to reflect the standard our family maintains." "The standard your family maintains," I repeated slowly. "Our family, which you'll be joining." She tapped the binder. "I've been cultivating relationships with these vendors for years. The photographer did the governor's daughter's wedding. The florist is flown in from Amsterdam. This is the kind of event that makes a statement." "What statement?" I asked. She looked at me like I was simple. "That you're worthy of being an Owen's wife." Owen had been quiet this whole time, his jaw tight. Now he spoke up. "Mom, I think we need to talk about this privately." "What's there to talk about?" Diane's voice rose slightly. "We're offering you a $450,000 wedding. Most couples would be grateful." "We are grateful," Owen said. But nothing. This is what we're offering. Take it or plan your own little backyard affair if that's what you prefer." She said backyard affair, the way most people say sewage leak. The drive home was silent. Finally, I asked, "Does she always get her way?" Owen sighed. "Pretty much. Growing up, it was easier to just go along with whatever she wanted. Less fighting." "Owen, this is our wedding. It's supposed to be about us." "I know, but maybe she has a point. I mean, it would be an incredible party. And it's free." "It's not free if the cost is losing control of our own wedding day." He didn't have an answer for that. That night, I made a spreadsheet of my own. I calculated what we could afford to spend. I researched venues, caterers, photographers. By 3 a.m., I had a complete wedding plan that we could pay for ourselves. It wouldn't be elaborate, but it would be ours. The next morning, I told Owen my decision. "I'm not letting your mother plan our wedding," I said. "We're going to do this ourselves." "With what money?" he asked. "We're saving for a house." We'll use some of the house fund. We'll work extra. We'll make it work." "That's insane. My parents are offering to pay for everything." "No, they're offering to pay for their wedding. The one they want with their friends, their vision, their control. I don't want that. Do you?" He was quiet for a long moment. No, he admitted, but turning them down is going to cause a massive fight. Then we fight. We called his parents that evening. I'd offered to let Owen handle it alone, but he wanted me there for support. We've decided to plan our own wedding, Owen said. We appreciate your generous offer, but we want something more personal. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Diane laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. You're joking. We're not, I said firmly. We've already started making plans. Plans with what money? Richard asked. Owen, you're barely established in your career. You can't afford the kind of wedding that reflects your standing. We can afford what we want, Owen said. It might not be the Ashford estate, but it'll be nice. Nice, Diane repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. You're willing to settle for nice when we're offering you spectacular. Do you have any idea how this will look? To whom? I asked again. To everyone. My friends, our business associates, the partners at Richard's firm. What will they think when they receive an invitation to some shabby little ceremony? If they're really our friends, they'll be happy we're getting married regardless of where it happens. You're being incredibly naive, Diane said. And selfish. Do you realize what this means to us? Our only son's wedding? Then you should be happy we're planning something we'll actually enjoy instead of a performance for your social circle. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. That went well, Owen said weakly. The next few weeks were brutal. Diane called Owen daily, alternating between tearful guilt trips and cold fury. She sent emails outlining everything we were giving up by refusing her help. She forwarded articles about proper wedding etiquette, all highlighting the importance of meeting family expectations. Richard tried a different approach. He called to discuss Owen's career trajectory, casually mentioning how helpful it would be to have certain people at the wedding, people who could open doors, people who definitely wouldn't come to a backyard affair. My own parents were confused, but supportive. It's your wedding, my dad said. You do what makes you happy. My mom was more direct. Sounds like your future mother-in-law needs to learn some boundaries. I threw myself into planning. I found a beautiful botanical garden that cost a fraction of the Ashford estate. I hunted for a photographer on Craigslist who turned out to be incredibly talented but just starting out. I ordered flowers from a local shop instead of flying them in from Amsterdam. I made centerpieces with my bridesmaids during craft nights. It was exhausting, working full-time at the law firm and planning a wedding on nights and weekends. But every decision we made felt right. Every choice reflected us. Owen was less certain. I'd catch him staring at his phone after his mother's latest guilt trip. She says my grandmother is devastated that she won't be able to see her only grandson married in a proper venue. Your grandmother is 91 and barely leaves her house. She's not devastated about the venue. But what if mom's right? What if we're being selfish? Owen, we're planning our own wedding with our own money according to our own wishes. That's not selfish. That's normal. But they're offering to pay for everything. At what cost? Your mother wants to control every single detail. She wants 300 guests we don't even know. She wants a wedding that's designed to impress her friends. Is that what you want? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The breaking point came 6 weeks before the wedding. Diane called me directly, which she rarely did. I need you to understand something, she said, skipping any pretense of pleasantries. You're tearing my family apart. I'm planning a wedding. You're destroying our relationship with our son. He won't talk to his father about work anymore. He canceled our weekly dinners. He's pulling away from us, and it's your fault. Diane, Owen is an adult. If he's setting boundaries, that's his choice. Boundaries, she spat. Is that what you call cutting your parents out of the most important day of their son's life? You're not cut out. You're invited guests like everyone else. Guests? We're supposed to sit there like strangers and watch you parade our son through some gardening wedding? Do you know how humiliating that is? It's a botanical garden, and I'm not parading anyone anywhere. We're getting married in a place we love, surrounded by people who actually care about us. I care about my son. Then prove it. Come to the wedding and be happy for him. That's all we're asking. Don't you dare tell me how to care for my child. I've known him his entire life. You've known him for 3 years. You have no idea what this family means, what we've built, what we expect. I know Owen, and I know what he wants. It's not a $450,000 spectacle designed to impress your country club friends. You're making a mistake, both of you. And when you realize it, when your little budget wedding falls apart and you need help, don't come crawling to us. We won't, I said and hung up. My hands were shaking. I'd never been confronted like that before. My own family had conflicts, sure, but they were loud and messy and resolved over dinner. This was different. This was cold, calculated, designed to make me doubt myself. Owen came home to find me stress-eating ice cream straight from the container. Your mother called, I said. What did she say? I told him. Everything. The accusations, the manipulation, the ultimatum. He listened quietly, his expression darkening. I'm done, he said finally. Done with what? Done with her bullshit. I've been trying to keep the peace, trying to make everyone happy. But she's not interested in peace. She's interested in control. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. There. I just sent them a message. They can come to the wedding and behave like normal guests, or they can stay home. Their choice. Owen, no, you were right from the beginning. This is our wedding, our life, and I'm not letting her poison it anymore. His phone immediately started ringing. He sent it to voicemail. It rang again, voicemail again. Then texts started flooding in. He turned the phone off completely. We're doing this our way, he said. Whatever happens, happens. The invitations went out 2 weeks later. Elegant but simple, printed on recycled cardstock, designed by my best friend who was a graphic designer. They were perfect. We sent one to Owen's parents at the same address as all the other guests. No special treatment, no acknowledgement of their attempted coup. Just a simple invitation to join us at the Botanical Garden on September 14th at 4 p.m. They didn't RSVP. A week before the wedding, Owen's grandmother called him directly. "Your mother told me you're getting married in a garden." "We are, Grandma." "That sounds lovely. Gardens are where things grow. Very appropriate for a marriage. I'll be there." "Mom said you wouldn't come." "Your mother says a lot of things. What she doesn't say is that I got married in my parents' backyard in 1951 with 15 guests and homemade cake. Best day of my life." She paused. "Your mother is terrified, you know." "Terrified of what?" "Of losing control of you. She's always measured her worth by her ability to manage everything perfectly. You choosing your own path means she failed somehow. It's not rational, but there it is. So what do I do? You live your life, sweetheart. She'll either come around or she won't. But you can't build your marriage on her approval." 3 days before the wedding, we still hadn't heard from his parents. Owen called them one last time. "I want you there," he said. "Both of you. But I need you to respect our choices." "We'll be there," Richard said after a long pause. "Your mother is processing." "Processing what?" "The fact that her son is a grown man making his own decisions. It's harder for her than she thought it would be." The wedding day was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The weather cooperated, giving us a crisp September afternoon with brilliant sunshine. The botanical garden was in full bloom, bursting with color. My dress was simple but elegant. Bought off the rack for $800 instead of the $15,000 designer gown Diane had picked out. My bridesmaids wore mismatched dresses in different shades of blue, something Diane had called tacky when she'd seen the photos. They looked beautiful. My brothers walked me down the aisle together, all 3 of them, because I couldn't choose just one. The ceremony was in a clearing surrounded by roses and hydrangeas. We'd written our own vows. When Owen promised to always choose us over expectations, love over appearances, and truth over comfort, I saw him glance toward where his parents were sitting, and they were sitting there, in the 3rd row, not the front row that had been reserved for them, the 3rd row. Behind my parents, behind Owen's grandmother, behind my aunt and uncle. Diane was wearing black, actual black, like she was attending a funeral. Richard sat rigidly beside her, stone-faced, but they were there. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes, short, sweet, personal. Our officiant was a friend from law school who told embarrassing stories about us that made everyone laugh. When we kissed, my brothers whooped so loudly that the garden birds scattered. The reception was held in the garden's conservatory, a glass building surrounded by tropical plants. We'd strung lights everywhere, making it glow as the sun set. The DJ was Owen's college roommate who played an eclectic mix that got everyone dancing. The food was served family style at long tables, encouraging people to talk and share. It was everything we'd wanted: warm, joyful, real. Diane and Richard sat at their table, barely touching their food. They didn't dance. They didn't mingle. They sat there like stone sentinels, bearing witness to our defiance. During dinner, Owen's grandmother made her way over to us. "Beautiful wedding, darlings. This is exactly what a celebration should be." "Thanks, Grandma." She glanced over at Diane and Richard. "Your mother is stubborn, always has been, but she's here, and that's something. She's wearing black. She's also crying. Look closer." I looked. Sure enough, Diane had a tissue balled up in her fist, mascara slightly smudged. "She'll come around," Grandma said, "or she won't. Either way, you two did the right thing. You built something that belongs to you. That's what marriage is." The speeches were hilarious. My maid of honor told stories about my dating disasters before Owen. Owen's best man revealed that Owen had Googled how to apologize for spilling coffee on someone before asking me to dinner that first time. When the best man finished, Richard stood up. I hadn't planned for this. We hadn't asked the parents to speak, specifically to avoid drama. "I'd like to say a few words," Richard said, his voice carrying across the conservatory. Owen tensed beside me. I reached for his hand under the table. Richard cleared his throat. "When Owen was born, I had certain expectations. I thought I knew exactly who he would become, what path he would follow, what kind of life he would build. I thought planning his future was my job as his father." The room was silent. What I didn't understand until recently is that my job wasn't to plan his life. It was to prepare him to plan his own. He looked directly at Owen. "You've done that, son. You've built something here that I didn't plan, didn't expect, and didn't understand at first." He paused, his composure cracking slightly. "But watching you today, seeing you so happy, seeing the life you've chosen, I realize I got it wrong. Not about you, but about what matters. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." He raised his glass. "To Owen and his bride. May your marriage be built on your own terms, not anyone else's." People clapped, but I was watching Diane. She was staring down at her plate, tears now openly streaming down her face. The party continued. My nephews demolished the cake, getting frosting everywhere. My parents danced with Owen's grandmother. My brothers convinced Owen to do shots at the bar. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely perfect. Around 10 p.m., as things were winding down, Diane approached me. I was standing by the windows watching the garden lights twinkle. "It was a beautiful wedding," she said quietly. I turned to face her. "Thank you for coming." I almost didn't. She twisted the tissue in her hands. "I was so angry. At you, at Owen, at everything. I couldn't understand why you were throwing away what I was offering. It wasn't what we wanted. I know that now. I had this vision of what Owen's wedding would be. I've had it for 30 years. And watching you plan something completely different felt like you were erasing all of that. We weren't trying to erase anything. We were trying to create something that reflected us. I see that now. Watching you two today, seeing how happy Owen is." She dabbed at her eyes. "He chose this. He chose you, and you let him be himself instead of trying to mold him into something you wanted. That's what love should be. Yes. She looked around the conservatory. This wasn't what I would have chosen, but it was beautiful, and it was real. And maybe that's more important than impressive. Maybe. She took a shaky breath. I'm not good at apologizing. I'm not good at being wrong, but I was wrong. About the wedding, about you, about what mattered, and I'm sorry. Diane, no, let me finish. I've spent so much energy trying to control Owen's life that I forgot to just enjoy being his mother. I don't want to make that mistake anymore. If you'll let me, I'd like to try to build a real relationship with you. Not the one I planned, but the one we actually have. I was surprised to find myself tearing up. I'd like that. Although I still think you should have had the Ashford estate photographer, she added, a tiny smile breaking through. I laughed. Noted. Owen found us a few minutes later, looking between us nervously. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I said, squeezing his hand. Diane touched his cheek gently. It really is, darling. You did well. Better than I gave you credit for. The wedding ended around midnight. We stood at the entrance, saying goodbye to guests as they left. Owen's parents were among the last to go. Thank you for inviting us, Richard said, shaking both our hands formally. Diane hugged Owen tightly, then surprised me by hugging me too. Call me when you get back from the honeymoon, she whispered. I'd like to take you to lunch, just us, if you're willing. I'd like that, I said. They walked to their car, Richard's arm around Diane's shoulders. I watched them go, feeling something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, and definitely not forgetting, but maybe the beginning of understanding. That was unexpected, Owen said. Your dad's speech was good. My mom apologized to you? Sort of, in her way. He pulled me close. We did it. We did. No regrets? I looked back at the conservatory, still glowing with lights. I thought about the day we'd had, the people who'd celebrated with us, the choices we'd made that had led to this moment. None, I said. Not a single one. We spent our honeymoon in a tiny cabin in Vermont, hiking and cooking and being completely unplugged from everything. When we got back, there was a package waiting at our door. Inside was an envelope and a small box. The envelope contained a check from Richard and Diane for $10,000, made out to both of us. The note read, "For your house fund, no strings attached. Love, Mom and Dad." The box contained a vintage photo album. Inside were pictures of Owen as a baby, a toddler, a teenager. The last page had a space labeled Wedding Day, with a note in Diane's handwriting. I was wrong about what this page should look like. I can't wait to see what photo you choose. Owen sat down heavily on the couch. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She's really trying. Yeah, she is. The check sat on our kitchen table for a week while we debated what to do with it. Finally, Owen called his parents. We want to accept this, he said, but we need to establish something first. This money comes with no expectations, no strings, and no decisions about our future. Can you agree to that? Yes, Richard said immediately. That's why we sent it. And Mom? I agree, Diane said, her voice slightly muffled through the phone. I'm learning to let go, Owen. It's not easy, but I'm trying. Then thank you. Really. This means a lot. We used the money as a down payment on a small house with a yard, a place that was entirely ours. Diane asked to see it once, came over with a bottle of wine and no advice whatsoever. It was progress. 2 months after the wedding, I took Diane up on her lunch invitation. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, both of us visibly nervous. I've been seeing a therapist, Diane said after we'd ordered. Since the wedding, she's helping me work through some control issues. That's good. She asked me where I learned that love meant control. I didn't have a good answer. Diane fiddled with her napkin. My mother planned my entire wedding. 600 guests, ice sculptures, the works. I hated every minute of it. Felt like I was on display, performing for people I didn't even know. Then why were you trying to do the same thing to us? Because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. That's what showing love looked like in my family. You controlled things because you cared. She looked up at me, her eyes wet. But you showed me something different. You and Owen built something based on what you actually wanted, not what you thought you should want. And watching you two on your wedding day, seeing how happy you were, it was just a wedding. No, it was a statement. You chose authenticity over approval. That takes courage I never had. Our food arrived, giving us both a moment to compose ourselves. I want to be better, Diane said finally. Better at being Owen's mother, better at being your mother-in-law. I can't promise I won't slip up. Old habits are hard to break, but I'm trying. That's all we can ask. Lunch lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything. Her childhood, my career, Owen's quirks that drove us both crazy, our hopes for the future. By the time we left, something had shifted between us. We weren't friends exactly, but we weren't adversaries anymore either. The rest of that first year of marriage had its challenges. Learning to live together, navigating careers, dealing with family dynamics. But the wedding had set a foundation. We made decisions together, based on what we wanted, not what others expected. Owen's relationship with his parents improved gradually. They started having dinners again, but on neutral ground instead of at their house. Conversations happened without ultimatums. Boundaries were established and, surprisingly, respected. Richard became genuinely interested in Owen's work, asking questions that weren't just about advancement and connections. Diane started sending me articles about cases at my firm, actually engaging with my career instead of dismissing it. It wasn't perfect. Diane still occasionally dropped comments about how much easier things would have been at the Ashford estate. Richard still used business metaphors when giving life advice. But they were trying, and we were trying, and slowly, things got better. A year after the wedding, we had both families over for Thanksgiving. It was our first time hosting, and I was nervous about putting my parents and Owen's parents in the same room for an extended period. I shouldn't have worried. My dad and Richard bonded over terrible golf stories. My mom and Diane discovered a shared obsession with murder mystery novels. My brothers taught Owen's parents how to play the most chaotic card game ever invented. After dinner, as everyone sat around talking and laughing, Diane found me in the kitchen. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For not giving up on us. You could have easily written us off after how we acted. Owen might have too, but you kept the door open. You're his parents. That's important to him." Still, she picked up a dish towel and started helping me dry. "I've been thinking about your wedding a lot lately, about why I fought it so hard. And I think I was afraid that if Owen made his own choices and they turned out well, it would mean all my choices were wrong. Like maybe I should have stood up to my own mother, should have planned my own wedding, should have lived differently." She was quiet for a moment. "But watching you two this year, seeing how happy you are, I realize it's not about my choices being wrong. It's about you making better ones. Diane, I'm proud of you," she said. "Both of you. You built something real, and you did it without compromise. That's rare." From the dining room, someone called for her to settle a debate about the best Agatha Christie novel. "Coming!" she yelled back, then turned to me. "Life is strange, isn't it? A year ago, I was ready to cut you out of my son's life. Now I can't imagine him with anyone else." She headed back to the dining room, leaving me standing there with tears in my eyes. Owen found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" "Yeah, just this." I gestured toward the sound of laughter from the other room. "Your parents are arguing with my brothers about whether Miss Marple could beat Hercule Poirot in a fight. My mom's getting really into it too." "I know. It's weird." "Good weird?" "The best weird." He pulled me close. "I keep thinking about the wedding. What if we'd given in? What if we'd let Mom plan everything? We'd have a lot of pictures of people we don't know. We'd also have lost ourselves before we even started. You knew that. You saw what was happening and refused to compromise on something that mattered. That's why I married. I thought you married me because I have excellent taste in coffee shops. That too." He kissed my forehead. "But mostly because you're brave enough to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Even when it costs something." It did cost something. Your relationship with your parents was rocky for months, but we got through it. And now they're in there arguing about fictional detectives with my new brothers-in-law. I'd call that a win. Someone dropped a plate in the dining room, followed by explosions of laughter. "We should probably go check on that," I said. "Probably." But we stood there for another moment, listening to our families, thinking about how far we'd all come. The wedding had cost us $23,000 of our own money. We'd lost sleep, endured stress, and risked permanent damage to family relationships. But standing there in our kitchen, listening to the sound of our families coming together, I knew we'd made the right choice. Not because the wedding was perfect, though it was, for us. Not because everything worked out easily, it absolutely hadn't. But because we'd established from the beginning that our marriage would be built on our terms, with our values, reflecting our truth. That foundation, that refusal to compromise on what mattered, carried us through everything that came after. When Diane showed up at the hospital 3 years later to meet her first grandchild, she brought a onesie that said, "I make my own choices," and laughed so hard she cried. "I deserve that," she said, holding our daughter for the first time. "I absolutely deserve that." "You really do," Owen agreed. She looked up at us. This woman who'd once tried to control every aspect of our lives, now humbled by time and therapy and grandmotherhood. "But thank you," she added softly, "for teaching me that sometimes the best thing you can give someone is the freedom to choose their own path, even when it's not the path you would have chosen for them." Our daughter grabbed Diane's finger and held on tight. "She's strong," Diane observed. "She is," I agreed. "Wonder where she gets that from." Owen laughed. "Both sides, I think. And maybe that was the real gift our wedding gave us. Not just a beautiful day or a lesson in standing our ground, but a roadmap for how to merge two families with different values into something new, something that honored both sides while creating its own identity." Years later, people still talk about our wedding, not because it was extravagant or expensive or featured in magazines, but because everyone who was there felt something real. They witnessed two people choosing love over expectations, authenticity over performance, truth over comfort. And they watched two families, so different in their approaches, learn to respect those choices. When Owen's parents renewed their vows on their 40th anniversary, they asked us to help plan it. Diane specifically requested something small and meaningful, like your wedding was. We held it in our backyard with 30 guests. Diane wore light blue. The food was potluck. Owen's grandmother made a speech about how proud she was that her daughter-in-law had finally learned what she herself had known all along, that love grows best in gardens, not castles. Diane cried happy tears that time. And when they sent out thank you cards afterward, Richard wrote a note to us that I've kept in a drawer with our wedding photos. "Thank you for showing us what matters," it read. "Not just on your wedding day, but every day since. You chose the harder path, the one that required courage and conviction. In doing so, you gave us permission to examine our own choices, to admit our mistakes, and to grow. That's a gift we never expected to receive from our son's marriage, but one we cherish more than you know." Our wedding cost $23,000 and a few months of family tension, but it bought us something priceless: the freedom to build a marriage on our own terms, and a relationship with Owen's parents based on mutual respect instead of control. Years later, when young couples ask us for advice, Owen always tells them the same thing: don't let anyone else plan your wedding. Not because weddings matter so much, but because how you handle that decision sets the tone for everything that follows. I usually add, and if someone offers to pay for everything if they can control it all, run. Run fast. Nothing that comes with strings is actually free. Then we look at each other and remember that September afternoon in the botanical garden, surrounded by people we loved, making promises we meant, building something that was entirely ours. It wasn't what Diane would have chosen for us, It was better, because it was real. And real, we've learned, always beats impressive, every single time.